sound cool. Sorry, sir. This thing is a little bit. His work as his project have been conferred with numerous awards, including Aga Khan Award for Architecture, World Architecture Award, UN Central Habitat Award, Architectural Review High Commendment Award, Prime Minister's National Award for Excellence in Urban Planning and Design, and ADCO Design Award, and he has been bestowed with the Padma Shri Award in 2019. He is a doctorate from University of California, and we welcome Dr. Bimal Patel for this lecture on modernizing Indian cities. Over to Dr. Bimal Patel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for asking me to give this important lecture, Foundation Day lecture. And I'm very happy that the director and staff are here, and I hope that you find this lecture worthwhile. Let me just get on with the lecture. That might be the best thing to do. So I need to share my screen. These are all new ways of functioning. So here we are. Here we are. Okay, let me start. Uh, Everybody knows that India is going through a sort of epochal transformation from a from a so, from a country that lived in its villages. We are becoming a country that lives in its towns and cities, and we are becoming an industrial and service economy, while earlier we used to be an agricultural economy. This is a really important transformation of the way Indians live. And this is also a point at which there are lots of stresses on the way we live. Our cities today are highly stressed because they are being transformed from one way of life, from being small towns and cities to being large industrial sort of metropolises. So in that process, there is a huge amount of stress. And this is the generation, our generation of architects and planners, that has the job of transforming our cities, modernizing them, making them livable in a completely new context. So it's in this context that I want to talk about this project, the Sabarmati Riverfront Development Project. As you can see here, it's an urban revitalization, environmental improvement, and social development project. So let me get on with the lecture. It's a long lecture that explains the project. It's a project that I've worked on for almost over 2 decades now. And so let me just get on with the next slide here. So before I start on this project presentation, let me first say something of great importance. Every city is different and every waterfront is different. So I don't want anybody to believe that what was done here can be completely replicated elsewhere. And yet many problems that our cities face, many problems that our rivers face, waterfronts face, and issues that we have to work on are similar. Therefore, there are also lessons from here that might help in tackling other rivers, other problems in cities. So let me start off by talking first about the Ahmedabad city and the Sabarmati River. So Ahmedabad was established over 600 years ago on the banks of Sabarmati River, on the eastern bank of Sabarmati River, by Ahmad Shah. Here is an engraving of a view of Ahmedabad from 1672 by a Dutch traveler who happened to be visiting here. Here's a map you can see of Ahmedabad. You can see the river flowing from north to south. You can see a fortified town here, and that fortified town is Ahmedabad. This is a map from 1866. So this is when the British were ruling over India and Ahmedabad. Then in the early 20th century, Ahmedabad started industrializing. It got its first textile mills and soon had many mills. It started to be called the Manchester of India. This industrialization brought a lot of stress and pressure on the city. You can see here the growth of the city. There is a series of drawings. You can see this in 1815. It was just a small town on the eastern side of the river. Here you can see the river. By 1941, it has spread out on both sides. 61, it's growing like an ink blot. Then you can see Gandhinagar here developed. 1991, it continues to grow out on two sides. Today, the city, here's a satellite image of the city. You can see the river right here flowing bang through the middle of the city. And the city is a 300 square kilometer area spread out on both sides of the river. It's an urban area that's here. Now, Sabarmati has always been important for Ahmedabad. It Sabarmati was the source for drinking water. In the early days, it was the main source for drinking water and water for other purposes. And here you can see a drawing of how water used to be carted from the river to the city. Later on, as the industries grew and water needs grew, these sort of French wells were built in the bed of the river. These are shallow wells, and water was pumped out of the riverbed and taken to the city for drinking water and other uses. The river has always been a place for recreation. This is Shahidjan's palace on the bank of the river in Ahmedabad. It's also been a place for gathering. This is not a perennial river. Most of the year, the bed used to be dry. So in the bed of the river was a big place where people could gather. Here you can see Gandhiji during the national struggle, 1931, on the below, in a gathering below the bridge here. The river was also a place for dyeing cloth. Okay. This is a famous French photographer's picture of cloth being dyed. This is also a place where people used to wash clothes. Once again, a dramatic image of clothes being washed in the Sabarmati River. Here's an earlier picture of clothes being washed and bathing in the river. The river was also a place in summer where people would farm because there was no water in the river in summer. It was just a small trickle. And so you could farm here. Most importantly, the river banks, when the city grew, became a place where poor people could build their hutments. So if they did not find land, since they did not find land in the city, the river banks became a place where slums developed, and this was the housing for the poor people of the city. This is a later picture. 20 years later also, you can see buildings have come up, but the banks are the places where there were slums. The river also had a market, and so this is a Sunday market on the river. Gandhiji built his ashram on the banks of Sabarmati River. So Sabarmati River is significant not just for Ahmedabad, but also for the country as a whole, because this is where the freedom struggle was forged from. And yet, despite it being such an important river, Ahmedabad, like most rivers across the country, Ahmedabad abused and neglected the river, like most rivers across the country. So the river became, over time, a place to dump garbage, as you can see here. And it also became a place where, through stormwater drains, untreated sewage was flowing into the river. Here you can see a nala bringing untreated sewage into the river. This is Dandi Bridge, and below that, this nala is taking sewage into the river. The slums on two sides had no services. And of course, from the slums, the sewage also came directly into the river. The slums, while they provided a place for housing the poor, also ended up reducing the flood carrying capacity of the river because there were slums on the banks. Now, when releasing water from the dam upstream, which I'll talk about later, it became very difficult to release water because the slums were there and not there was not enough space to discharge the water. The slums constrained the flood carrying capacity of the river. You can see here that the city, in a sense, the development on the two sides of the city, on two sides of the river, was quite haphazard and quite dull, as you can see here. Both sides, it was as if people have turned their backs to the river. Most importantly, here you can see an image. The entire edge of the river became completely private on two sides. And there, if anybody wanted to walk along the banks of the river, it was not really possible because both the edges had become completely privatized. Here you can see another image of the dry river bed with the edges have slums and the river has turned into a drain uh, flowing through the middle. Whichever places you could get to the river bed from were choked by slums, and the only place that the river could be enjoyed from was the bridges. And in summer, indeed, people would walk up and down the bridges because this was a vast expanse. At least you could enjoy the expanse. Here's an image of the river at the end of the 20th century, towards the end of the 20th century. Uh, and you can see here the state it is in. There's sewage in the water. There's clothes washing activity. There are slums. This is the kind of edge of the river that was there. Ahmedabad was not alone in abusing its river. This is something you must keep in mind. Most Indian cities treat rivers as garbage dumps and places where sewage has to be thrown in. Here's the river in Pune. Here's the river in Nagpur. You can see here, it's a complete sewage drain. Here's in Varanasi. The Ganga is also polluted. And India is not alone. You can see here, this is in China. You can see the Yangtze River in China. There's so much industrial pollution in the river that the color has turned red here. Also, we must remember that in the Western world, when they were industrializing, rivers were also much abused and much neglected. This is an image from England. You can see here the pollution from the industries, and you can see the condition of the rivers. This is also in England. Our cities, Indian cities, are not special in the way they have abused. Whenever cities industrialize, this problem seems to have emerged in all places. Here's another image of Manchester in England. The rivers were full of sewage and completely messed up. In contrast, today, if you look at cities across the world, many cities have very beautiful waterfronts. Here, for example, is Paris. Everybody knows that Paris has a beautiful river running through the middle, and on both sides, on the banks, tourists and local citizens gather. This is the place where you can come and spend some time and be inspired by the place. So the rivers today are not at all like they were earlier. London too has a terrific waterfront. This is the Westminster, the Parliament of England, on the river edge here. And New York, you can see it's a great metropolis, but the entire edge here along the water is a beautiful place. You can see here another place, the entire edge of New York City. The waterfront is lovely. You can find places like this in New York, in such a metropolis, along the water to to promenade, to walk, to jog. Here's Sydney. Sydney has a terrific waterfront. The Sydney Opera House is a great icon known all over the world, and tourists flock to this waterfront. Singapore has a great waterfront, as you can see here. Many tourists go there. This is in Shanghai. As you can see, the Shanghai waterfront. It's a very wide river, and you can see the this is the Bund area of Shanghai, where people are gathered along the river. And of course, there's Mumbai. It has a fantastic waterfront. The Marine Drive is a terrific waterfront in an Indian city. What we must keep in mind, especially as architects and urban designers and planners, is that these waterfronts, these lovely waterfronts that I showed you of cities across the world, did not always exist. You see, infrastructure was built, rivers were cleaned, and riverfronts were developed as meaningful public spaces. God didn't endow the countries of the Western world with beautiful waterfronts to start with. They were all created by people. Here's an example which shows you. This is London in 1795, London situated on the River Thames. And you can see here an image from 1795. You can see here this building called Somerset House. It's a tidal river, and the buildings used to be built right up to the edge of the river. And here you can see a place where the boats could go directly into the river, into the building. Here's another view of the same river, 1817. Somerset House is to the left-hand side here, the tidal river here, and the boats could go directly into the building. But you see, London by this time was already industrializing, and there was lots of sewage and muck and garbage coming directly into the river from the city. Very soon, the Thames River in London was extremely polluted. And this is in 1830, a cartoon from a magazine called Punch, which is talking about the state of the river in London. You can see, they used to take drinking water from the same river. And so it says here, source of the Southwark waterworks. And you can see here the messy river with the sewage flowing in. And here it says all sorts of things like, what do they drink that? We are all going to get cholera, and so on and so forth. So Thames was awfully polluted. Now in 1857, the situation of the Thames became so bad, and the stink from the river became so bad, that they had to stop functioning of Parliament, because nobody could sit in Parliament. And as it happens, this is the time at which action was taken. That's when the politicians got together and asked this engineer called Bazalgette to execute the plans that he had developed earlier for improving the banks of Thames River. So Bazalgette got to work, and this was Victorian England, and this is a picture of the embankment that they started building on the Thames. Once again, this is the same view. This is near Somerset House here, and you can see the embankment being built. Victorians were great city infrastructure builders, and here you can see Somerset House once again. By 1875, they had built an interceptor sewer to stop the flow of sewage, and they had built an embankment and created a sort of public realm along the Thames River. Slowly, this kept getting built, the trees started growing, and here you can see a view with grown trees. You can see the Victoria embankment here. You can see this is also near Somerset House. This is a view of the river. And slowly the river was made clean, and the edge of the river was improved. Today, if you go, that's Somerset House. There's a statue of, there's a bust of Bazalgette just at this location. And this is the embankment that you can see today there. And it's a beautiful place that tourists go to. It's the same with New York. New York used to have an industrial waterfront. Along the water, there were places for ships. You can see, and today it has a waterfront that has parks and gardens. It was turned from an industrial area to a different sort of area. Here you can see all the jetties coming out in New York, and this is Battery Park here. All of this, at one point, the industry was taken out of here, and once the industry has moved out, they turned it into a new development with a terrific waterfront. Here you can see next to the Twin Towers when they used to be there. You can see the land where the jetties used to be. Sorry about that, jetties used to be, and here you have what was built in its place. So, uh, uh, once again, let me say, people are not, cities like this have not been endowed with waterfronts and beautiful places to start with. They have made a lot of effort to transform their cities into great livable places. Here's Singapore in the 1960s. It used to have a stinky river, polluted, and you can see fishing boats here. Today, it's a wonderful waterfront that 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 you can visit in Singapore. This is in Chengdu, China, 1993. The river through the middle of the city was polluted, slums on either side, sewage in the middle, and this has been transformed into a beautiful waterfront here. So back to Ahmedabad and the abused and neglected Sabarmati River. Let me talk about the Sabarmati Riverfront Development Project now. But before I do that, first I need to explain the river in the regional context. This, as you might all recognize, is a map of Gujarat. You can see the Aravalli Hills here on top, and this is the Gulf of Cambay here. And this is the Sabarmati River. It originates in the Aravalli Hills. You can see this red spot, which is Ahmedabad, and the river flows from north to south into the Gulf of Cambay. All the water, rainwater that falls in this area, this shaded area, in the catchment area of the Sabarmati River upstream of Ahmedabad, used to go gushing past Ahmedabad. And in the monsoon, we would get huge floods, and then the river would be dry for the rest of the year. This is the flood that Ahmedabad witnessed in 1973. You can see here that the water is high. It has come right up to the top of the bridge. And this really scared the city and stirred the city and the state government into action. Because of this flood, these dams were built upstream. This is Daroi Dam, and a few other dams were built, and soon half the catchment area of the river was brought under control. Once these dams had been built, there was no longer a natural flood that would come into the river. But when there was a lot of rainfall, the dam gates would be open. And once the gates were open, water would come gushing past into Ahmedabad. So we would get floods after the dams were open, but there was nothing called a natural flood any longer. This is when the gates were opened in 2006. You can see the river. It's a wide river, but and this was not as big a flood as the one in 1973, and yet you can see it's a massive flow of water that gushes past Ahmedabad. Another important development that happened when these dams were built was the building of a barrage downstream of Ahmedabad that you can see here. It's called Vasna Barrage. A barrage is a very low dam where the gates open upwards. They don't open downwards. Water doesn't flow on top of the dam but goes from below the dam. This is the barrage that was built. It's not very tall, but this barrage was built to hold water in the river for irrigation purpose. So once this barrage was built, Ahmedabad, after the monsoons, would have some water stored in the middle of it. Here you can see the water stored in Ahmedabad by the Vasna Barrage. And you can see a sort of irregular river with water stored in it. And this water would be used up for irrigation. For a few months, you would have water in the river. So you got a seasonal lake, a seasonal linear lake in the middle of the city in 1976. And once this lake emptied out because of the rain, this is the water emptying out of the river. And once it emptied out, once again the bed would be like this, dry, sandy bed, which with a trickle of water in the middle, mainly sewage going through the middle. And you can see Ahmedabad here. This is from the early 1980s, an image of the early 1980s. Another important regional development that happened was the building of the Narmada Dam. Narmada River is here, as you can see, flowing from Madhya Pradesh into Gujarat, and Narmada Dam is built here. And there is a canal that goes all the way from Narmada Dam and goes past Sabarmati River and goes to north and Gujarat and western Gujarat. And this canal, just above Ahmedabad, is where it bisects Sabarmati River. So here you can see the image of that of the canal. Excuse me for a second. I'm going to move this here. Yeah. Oops. So here you can see the river that goes north to south here. Okay, that's the whole river. This light gray area here, if you can see, is Ahmedabad city. Here you can see Vasna Barrage that has been built. You can see that this is the water that is held in the river on account of the Vasna Barrage. Here, 15 kilometers, water would be held for 15 kilometers. To understand this, you must understand that the river slopes from, as it goes down here, the land slopes. They've built a wall here. So this is like a swimming pool. At this end, you have the deep end of the water. At this end, you have the shallow end of the water. This is the irrigation canal through which irrigation water is given from the Vasna Barrage. And here you can see the Narmada Canal. Now, when canals like this are built, a siphon is always provided for releasing water from the canal into the river. That would serve irrigation purpose, and also when the canal needed to discharge water quickly during a big flood in the dam, they would use this siphon. Now, because of this development, what happened was that Ahmedabad, instead of having a seasonal linear lake, now water could be released into the river here throughout the year, and Ahmedabad ended up getting a perennial linear lake in the middle of the city. So you can see here, this is the perennial linear lake in the middle of the city. Ahmedabad's landscape is dry. It used to have many lakes. The dry landscape had many lakes. As the city grew, many of these lakes were covered up, as often happens when cities grow in a haphazard, unplanned manner. Then these lakes get destroyed. You can see this entire landscape used to have man-made lakes. There were some of these which were actually, now Ahmedabad had a big lake in the middle of the city. So these were all sorts of lakes near villages, and these were some of these, like this round one here, were built, and sort of Kankaria Lake or Sarkhej Lake were tanks built during the Muslim rule, and here you had one more linear lake in the middle of the city. You must remember that this lake that we saw earlier was done in 1976. Ahmedabad had this barrage was built in 1976. Narmada Canal was built, and now all of this happened without any reference to the riverfront project. Actually, Ahmedabad had talked many times about a riverfront project. One of the earliest times was 1960s, when a French architect living in Ahmedabad had proposed that the bank should be developed. It's not a surprise. He came from Paris. He knew how rivers could be transformed and talked about that here. In 1976, a group of professionals in Ahmedabad had also proposed doing the riverfront development. But it's only in 1997 that Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation became serious about developing the riverfront. And here you have a formation of a company at that time called the Sabarmati Riverfront Development Company Limited. This was a company that was established by the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation and belonged to the Municipal Corporation, 100% owned by the Municipal Corporation. You can see here the company had a board of directors that was led by the municipal commissioner. There was mayor on it. The leader of the opposition was also on the board of the company. Various other citizen members were also there from the city. And there was also the collector of Ahmedabad and various other people. So all the stakeholders that would be necessary for implementing the project were brought onto the board of the company. And the company was given the task of transforming the river and doing the riverfront project. I got involved in this project in 1996 when we were asked to first develop a comprehensive master plan, which of course looked at all aspects of the river, from its physical features to river hydraulic, which means the flow of water and flooding, etc., the land reclamation, embankments, land ownership. It was a complete comprehensive look. It was not just an architectural study or an urban design study of what the river should be, but it asks questions like what will we do about the slums? What will we do about the sewage? How will we pay for this project? Everything had to be answered. This project was done not just as an architectural project. Later on, after the master planning phase got finished, my role shifted to that of being the manager for the project. This also was done professionally, and we provided professional management services for strategizing the project, for getting regulatory approvals, for promoting the project, and doing everything that was necessary to the project. So it's, as I said, an environmental improvement, social development, and urban rejuvenation project. Let me explain what that means. The project didn't have one objective, it had multiple objectives. And urban projects are like this. They are complex. They must do multiple things. They cannot do just one thing. This project had 11 objectives. And here, let me try and explain what they were. The first objective was to make the riverfront accessible to everyone. I told you that over the years, the entire edge of the river had become private. Okay, and so there were private buildings coming right up to the edge of the river. So if anybody wanted to walk along the length of the river, it was impossible. There was also slums along the bank, but there were also many private buildings. Most of the edge was actually private buildings, and there were slums in a few locations, as you can see out here. So this was to create a public edge along the river, to create a public realm along the river. What we decided was to train the river, which is to narrow it by building embankments and reclaiming land from the bed of the river. Okay, this is exactly how Marine Drive was built, for example. And here you have a sort of narrowing of the river. Now, here's the bed of the river. This is the city. You can see now I've turned the map around. North is to the left of us, and south is to the right of us. That's the eastern side of the city on top, and the western side below. And you can see the bed of the river going through, and the bed is in some places quite narrow and some places quite wide here. You can see the bed is empty just now. This is during the summer. And here, what we did was create a sliver of land by narrowing the river. And you can see a defined waterway of 275 meters was done. Okay. Uh, this was not just some line drawn by some urban designer architect, but this was followed. This drawing such narrowing the river in this manner follows complex engineering studies of river hydraulics. So we worked with hydraulic engineers to sort of define what the waterway could be. You can see here a cross section of the river where it was wide, some places it was narrow, and essentially these sort of embankments were built on the two sides, and the proposed cross section of 275 meters remained in the middle. Where the river was wide, we got a lot of land. Where the river was narrow, we got less land. So here is how it was done. This should be easy to understand. This is one bank of the river, you can see here. This is the water that is retained by the barrage. Okay, that's the top of the water level. I told you that the barrage holds water at one end like a swimming pool. One end is deep, the other end is shallow. The bed of the river, of course, slopes. This is like an average water level I've shown here. This is the high flood level. This is the amount of water that's likely to come in case there is a flood, a 100-year flood. This is stormwater outlet through which stormwater from the surrounding areas comes into the river, but actually sewage flows through here. And this line, vertical line here, distinguishes between the privately owned land and the public riverbed. So this is the cross section in the original situation. The first thing that was done was to take sand from the bed of the river and put it here along the banks so that we created a construction platform. Now, this is not very complicated work. You can see here, these boats have pumps. The pumps are pumping water and sand onto the side. The water flows back, the sand remains there, and soon you have a construction platform on the side. Once the construction platform was built, a concrete wall was built into the bed of the river that went down 10 meters deep. It was below the scour level, which means that when the flood would come, the sandy bed would get scoured, and the wall had to be going below the level of the scour. So that's the scour level here. And you can understand your architects, planners, etc. You can see that this is where the wall is actually anchored embedded in the bed of the river, and when the flood comes, all of this would push outwards, and this would be a cantilever, so you're pulling it back, and that's an anchor slab holding back the, the wall here. So that's an anchor slab and the wall. You can see here the wall being built. That's the construction platform here. That's the wall, the trench dug for the wall. Here is the digging of the trench, and then concreting is done into this trench. You put in the concrete, and soon we had a wall that was built and an anchor slab. So this was in 2007. You can see here that this was built here. Once the anchor slab was built, a retaining wall had to be built up to the high flood level, and with sand essentially taken from the river, we created the embankments, so up to the height of the high flood level. Okay. Here is a long section. This shows 15 kilometers here. This distorted section. This shows 10 meters here. You can see the bed of the river sloping down here. You can see the barrage here. The barrage is holding water here. This is the high flood level. So the wall has to be built in a slope here. These are all the bridges that you can see on top here. So it's you can see that's the swimming pool that is formed because of the barrage. And the wall here would have a low height. Here the wall would have a higher height. Here the wall would be much under the water, and here it would be. The anchor slab that I talked to you about is built, of course, at this level. At this level here. Oops, sorry. So here we are. This is the building of the retaining wall. You can see here. Here's the retaining wall being built. This is not rocket science. These are local. This doesn't take huge amount of technology. Here is the embankments. This is the sand taken from the riverbed and put into this area here. And this is the land that is being created on one side, and that's the public realm of Ahmedabad. So here you have the river in 1949, just an image that we found. This is the river as it looked in 2001. The project hadn't started at that time. Once 2002, then also it has not started. Here you can see 2003. Once again, project is just about to be inaugurated. Here you can see the 2006. Some of the land has been reclaimed here, and the embankment is being built. 2007. Now in 2009, 2011, 2013, you can see there's development on the two sides, 2015, and yes, this is 2020. So what the project has done, as you can see here, is that on two sides of the river, it has created a public realm. The private edge of the river has been converted into a public space on two sides of the river. Here's another image of the same thing. You can see here the lower promenade, and you can see the land that has been created on the two sides. I'll be talking more about this as we go along. So the project has essentially converted a private river edge into a public river edge. It is a great project of socializing what used to be private has been made a social asset. The second objective is to stop the flow of sewage into the river. You can see here it used to be a messy river. This sort of Ganda Nala was bringing sewage into the river. Here you can see more sewage. These were the places at which sewage was being spewed into the river. This was untreated sewage coming in. And so essentially what was done was an interceptor sewage line was built on two sides uh, to collect all the sewage and take it to the two sewage treatment plants at the end here. There are two sewage treatment plants here. So all the sewage was collected and taken there. Here is a cross section. Won't go into details of this. You can see here that this is the sewage line that has been built running along the length of the project. It is 11 kilometers long. Here the sewage pipe is being laid while the embankment was being done. This is the sewage pipeline with the manholes, as you can see here. And the flow of sewage into the Sabarmati has more or less stopped. There is one place at which there is still some work pending, and it's once that gets done, it'll be a totally sewage-free river. The third objective was to recharge groundwater into the city. Now you can see that water is stored here, and once the sewage is removed, it's clean water. But this water is daily percolating into the bed of the river, and some of it is getting evaporated. So every day, about 750 million liters of water is lost. Today, that water is coming from the Narmada Canal. Every day, there is water from the Narmada Canal filling up the lake of Ahmedabad. But eventually, what is going to happen is that the sewage treatment plants actually treat the sewage of Ahmedabad and produce enough treated water to replenish the water that is lost to evaporation every day. So from the sewage treatment plants, the water will be put here. So eventually this project will be just basically a grand recharge project, a water recharging project. So Ahmedabad sucks water out of the ground, uses it, turns it into sewage, sends it to a sewage treatment plants, and the treated water now is put back into the river, and then the cycle continues. So it's a completely sustainable way of having a lake in the middle of the city. Presently, Narmada water is coming because it is free. And so soon now, the Sabarmati riverfront will not be getting Narmada water. So more and more, it will be relying on treated sewage to have the lake in the middle of the city. The fourth objective was to provide housing for riverbed slum dwellers. I told you there were slums on both sides. You can see the slums here. These were not good living conditions, flood prone, no services, disease prone, and of course, these were all people living illegally on the land there, and therefore always under the threat of slum lords and eviction. Here you can see some more images of the kind of slums that were there. These were not wonderful living conditions. So we studied all the slums on both sides. They had approximately 10,000 households. Not all of them in the project area. About 4,000 were in the project area. There's a very detailed socio-economic survey that was done, valuation of all the assets of the slum dwellers, and a scheme was worked out so that the people living in these blue slums you can see here were essentially given housing in where you see these red plots are. These were open lands belonging to municipal corporation. Housing was built there. Eventually, a total of 11,000 houses were built, and the people were moved from the slums in the river to these houses here. The whole process was overseen by the High Court, and generally speaking, it happened smoothly. Here you can see an allotment fair where the houses are being allotted to people. A total of 11,400 houses almost got built. This meant, the houses, very small amount of the cost of the house was paid by people, as you can see here, just 66,000. The market value of the house they got at that time was 10 lakh rupees. So this meant that the poorest people, poorest 11,000 households of Ahmedabad got a subsidy of almost 1,000 crores. Okay, this was a huge cross transfer of assets to the poorest people of the city. Here are some images after the housing was done. These are people in the relocation housing. Not all the housing colonies worked out well, but most of them did. Here are some images of the housing that was created. So 11,000 households, about 50,000 people were moved from the riverfront slums into housing such as this. We were not directly responsible for design of the housing. I think a much better job can be done, but nonetheless, this was far better than the slum conditions that the people were in. Of course, initially there was resistance, but slowly people understood the benefits and reaped the benefits of moving to a house that they owned and which had services, water supply, drainage, and it was a healthier place to live in. The fifth objective of the project was to reduce the risk of erosion and flooding. As you can see here, there were some areas of Ahmedabad that were low-lying, like this Paldi area here, and Sabarmati River's banks were all very sandy, and when big floods like this would come, the banks would get eroded. And anybody who could afford it had built walls such as this ones. You can see here all these housing colonies, flats, etc., had individually built walls. Here you can see walls. Here's the big wall in front of Gandhi Ashram. If this wall had not been built in the 60s, Gandhi Ashram would have got washed out. Uh, and everybody was individually building walls. Of course, now with the building of the embankment, we got one common wall for Ahmedabad. Here you can see in 2015, this is flooded. The lower promenade here is flooded. And when the flood water receded, of course, then we got back you got back the lower promenade. As you can see here, Ahmedabad's banks were protected by the riverfront project. The sixth objective, of course, was to create riverfront parks and promenades. Ahmedabad is a big city. It lacks many parks. It's a dense city. And so a lot of land got created here. And you can see here in this land that was created, almost 50% of the land was parks and promenades. So here are some early visualizations when construction was ongoing. That's the lower promenade, still at the back here, filling the embankment has not been built. But we had to, at that time, because as architects and planners, we had to draw visualizations like this to show what the parks would be like. Here you can see the revolving restaurant of Ahmedabad, the lower promenade, and a visualization of the parks. In this place, which had got built and the trees had not grown, we drew this sort of an image to show what the lower promenade would be like. In this place near Gandhi Ashram, here's a visualization. These were these were very detailed visualization. We made 20-foot wide panels for this to show to people. This is the Gandhi Ashram steps, and we said someday it's going to be like this. And here is a big ground at the far end of the river, which we said could have a play field of this sort. So these were renderings that we drew up at that time to show what people would. Now, when the lower promenade got built, you can see here the lower promenade is built. You can see the water here. This was in 2012. People started to discover this place, and this is in 2012 when the first bank of the river was opened up. First lower promenade was opened up. You can see people congregating here. This is a news cutting from 2012. They called it the Promenade of Joy. Here you can see once again in 2012 people using the riverfront during the monsoon. Soon this has now slowly become a place where a lot of people go. Here all sorts of people exercising in the morning. You can see people from very different classes mingle here. This is a truly public space here. Here you can see below the bridges, the walkways below the bridges, there's boating along the river. And, during the festivals, it really gets crowded, as you can see here. And here's some more images. This young lady says that she uses the place to study. Um, And here you can see a family going out for a walk during the evening. What used to be an edge like this has now become an edge like this. I go back here. That's the Reserve Bank of India. Sorry, that's the Reserve Bank of India. You can see this used to be in the 80s what the bed was like, and this is what it is like with a public edge and still getting developed. There are many parks and gardens. You can see here, this is the Subhash Bridge Park, almost 1.5 kilometers. The trees are growing now, Ashram Bagh. This is a picture from 4 or 5 years ago. The trees have really grown in this area. That's a park on the edge of the river. Here's another one called the Flower Park, as you can see here on the right hand side. That's and there's a big structure in there, a greenhouse structure. And here is the flower park when you have the festival, flower festival here. Here's an event garden, a huge place where large events are held, and that's the event garden at night when it's lit up. So it's become a place. Here's the children's park along one side of the river. At one end, you can see a fountain has been created there for kids to play. So the Riverfront project has added almost 1 million square meters of parks in Ahmedabad. The seventh objective was to create trade and cultural facilities. Here you can see where there was a wide riverbed, there was a possibility of creating a trade fair facility, and so this is the trade fair complex that has been planned. This is the event ground that has come up. Here's another image of the event ground across. Uh, this is the on this side here you can see there used to be a small flea market that I talked to you about. This has been converted into a large market for poor people. There almost 1600 vendors um, uh, sell their goods here. This is the entire Sunday market of Ahmedabad. Here you can see the market on Sundays. This is a poor people's market. This is not something the entire place has trees planted, and soon will be completely shaded place. These are pictures from at least 7 years ago. So here is the riverfront market here. There was a lot of clothes washing along the river, and the people who used to wash clothes, a special laundry complex was created for them. You can see here, these are the people. Now they've, of course, automated their laundries because they have a secure place and proper water supply and drainage. Uh, here's a place where a sports complex is being built. Sports fields are being built here, as you can see. This should be ready in another few months and ready for use, tennis courts, etc. Here the project is adding, so essentially it's adding many trade and cultural facilities. The eighth objective was to revitalize the riverfront neighborhoods. Not just, once you do a riverfront like this, the two sides, the adjacent neighborhoods get revitalized. Plans have been made for revitalization of the riverfront. So that is the Ashram Road area where densification has been planned. And you can see this is what the riverbed used to look like in the 80s. This is what it looked like a few years ago. And many of these buildings have started coming up. These are just visualization, but this one is not. You will see later on. And soon both sides you will get high-rise buildings that not at all places, but in a few key places. And this will become the business district of 2030. Already you have places like this, and the riverfront you can see on the right hand side from here. The other idea was to improve Ahmedabad street network. It had a very poor street network along the river. This is the north-south connection, very poor. So these two roads were added, which has immensely helped the movement of traffic in the area. And you can see here, these are the crossroads that have been added. You can see the roads on the this is a road on the western side, the one on the eastern side. Wherever possible, the road was kept towards the inside, and the edge had parks and gardens like you have here. And in other places we decided to keep the road on the outside. This is not a huge road, it's just a 4-lane road. And this is what it looks like. You can see most of these trees have now grown, and it's a different place altogether. That's the street. That's another area where the street is. The 10th objective was to pay for the riverfront development. As you can see here, the project is designed to fully pay for itself from the sale of a portion of the reclaimed land. Uh, Initially, we thought that out of the reclaimed land, we would have to sell about 20% land to pay for all the expense of the project. So the project does not use taxpayer money. This is really an important aspect of the project, and which is why it actually got built. Um, Later on, we felt that only selling 15% will be enough, about 14.5%. So all of these blue colored plots are the plots that have been earmarked for development, for sale, for development. In these, we made a big model to find out what the buildings along the riverfront would be like. You can see here some volumetric bylaws have been done. This one building has actually been built on this red colored plot. We defined, this is the area in which it was to be built. You can see here the volumetric guidelines that tell you how much volume you can build within. This was the building as designed. You can see this is the rendering of the building as designed. Here you can see the building coming up uh, and slowly the building getting completed. This is also from a few years ago. Here you can see the building along the riverfront that has been built. Here's another image of that same building. So there'll be a series of buildings here. Entire area, the back, of course, over the years is likely to get redeveloped. You can see here another image of the building also. Now, the entire project, the cost of the project, construction cost is estimated finally to be just 1,500 crores. Presently, only about 850 have been spent. Relocation housing, I told you, is 1,000 crores. Interest costs, it will be about 750 crores because money has been borrowed to do the project. Um, and so you can see here total cost will be around 3,200 crores, which is not much at all. And the total revenues from this project, from the sale of land, is estimated at 3,500. So it's a completely self-financing project. In addition to this, the riverfront development is also generating revenue from sale of additional development rights along the river. You can see all these real estate projects coming up along the river are benefiting from the project. You can see that they are benefiting from their brochures. These are the brochures of real estate projects which say they are right along the riverfront. You can see here they are showing that this tower is next to the riverfront. Or here, for example, this fellow saying that his tower is next to the riverfront. Or here they're saying, listen, this is along. They have a map of the riverfront showing where their project is from. Here's another brochure of saying this is the view you will get from your building, so on and so forth. Here's another one still, a real estate project. Now, all these projects are benefiting from the riverfront. The city is benefiting through the charges it levies on the FSI that these developers are using. So this developer, for example, has paid for some of the FSI of this building and paid 36 crores to get that FSI. Here's another one who has paid about 5 crores. Here's yet another one who has paid 20 crores. Actually, till about a year and a half ago, almost 164 or 165 crores worth of revenue had been got from sale of just these 18 buildings on the two sides. So that was another big objective of making it a self-financing project. Projects should not be thought of as just using taxpayer money, but you have to build into the design the mechanism for financing them. Finally, the 11th objective was to bring Ahmedabad together around a large civic project. uh, to build Ahmedabad as a city, build its capacity to tackle complex urban projects, and to show that even within a fractious, spirited democracy, things can be made to work. This project just shows that we don't have reason to be despondent. We don't have to believe that things can't be done in India. Things can actually be done. It took a long time. This is the early days when the project was being, this is the gentleman who got the project going in the city. And this is in our studio. We are showing the project, showing it to lots of people. Here is myself explaining the project to people who were, so we were, first when you make this project, it has to be explained to lots of people. Here's in the Chamber of Commerce explaining the project. This was in the in the late 90s. Here's a workshop for Ahmedabad professionals on what the project should be like. You know, finally, it took a long time for the project to get going because it was a completely new idea at one time. It got a, in year 2000, it got a nod from the cabinet, as it says. In 2002, the project won an award, an urban design award from Delhi. This helped to push the project forward. You can see here the commissioner of Ahmedabad and the mayor of Ahmedabad and the opposition leader. And this is the man who promoted the project. This was the ex-mayor. Everybody has come to receive the award. City starts taking pride in what it's doing. Finally, in 2004, the project got going. The chief minister at that time was our present prime minister. He pushed the project forward. You can see him here inaugurating the project along with everybody else in 2004. These are people from the opposition and various people from his own party, all of them together. Here is a flood in 2006. The city got a bit scared at that time, wondering what the project is going to do. You could find newspaper headlines like this saying river carrying capacity under study. Of course, we studied it, showed that it was the earlier studies were all okay. Again, the project started going. Here was a place where we displayed the project during a state level fair. Here you can see a model of the project put up, a large drawing of the project at the back. Here are all the people going past, looking at the model, wondering what is going to come up. Here you can see somebody you might recognize. This gentleman here is Mr. Ambani, who is being shown the project by Mr. Nathwani here. Perhaps wondering what they're going to buy up here. Here you have the newspaper reporting. I don't know, this is from 2007 or 8, when, the newspaper is talking about a Desi Manhattan in the making. Here's the fire brigade people of Ahmedabad trying out. Then there was lots of court cases. There were, of course, advocates of all sorts, sometimes sensible, sometimes quite insensible, sort of opposition to the project, environmentalists, sometimes sensible, sometimes quite bigoted and fundamentalist in their approach. Um, there were people who were arguing against the rehabilitation of slum dwellers. The High Court was monitoring the project. So this, you see, projects like this will necessarily be debated a lot, fought over a lot. But this, it is precisely in a democracy, you have to learn how to work with all of these forces. And slowly, here, for example, was somebody who was claiming that the Riverfront project is going to wipe out the market. There was nothing like that. Here is the mayor of Ahmedabad saying, no, 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 we are going to build a market. So these, it's only through doing projects like this that actually people come together. What shouldn't take the debate and discourse as something that is a problem. Here is one lady claiming that this project is entirely for real estate developers. Of course, there's no such thing was there. Here, there's a rebuttal saying that this is all, there's more open space here. Only 20% of the land is being sold, and that too to pay for the project, not to make profits. At one stage, there was these terrible renderings that the newspaper was doing, so we decided to make good renderings. Here's an example. We would take pictures like this and then draw up what this place is likely to look like afterwards. Here is a rendering that we drew. We had to learn how to draw these. We never knew how to draw renderings like this, but these are very sophisticated drawings. For example, this one, which is talking about the kite festival in Ahmedabad along the riverfront. Then we would make large panels like this, as you can see here, 20-foot wide, and people would come and see these panels, and this was large exhibition. People come see such exhibitions. Here's another exhibition where people would come and see what the riverfront project would be like. Here's yet another project exhibition with a large model in the middle and drawings of this place. As you can see here, large model. So that's what the project has been about for 20 years, bringing the Sabarmati River back to Ahmedabad, and Ahmedabad is back to the Sabarmati River. The good news is that the project is being extended. So 11 kilometers of the riverfront has already been built. Another 5 kilometers is to be built. Here are some new renderings that we are doing. This time we are going to do a different type of embankment because it's outside the city, undeveloped land. You can see here, that's the kind of embankment we are trying to build here. Here's yet another view of the kind of riverfront we want to do. And so that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. This was something, a very, very excellent work in this field to give us a very good opportunity to come out with new innovations. As you rightly said, whenever the innovation comes, there is always a deliberation, democracy, as well as a divergence of opinion. But I'm sure, and I've seen it myself, your project attracted city councillors, mayors, administrators across India and abroad. I've seen many of them going there, rushing to see what is happening in Sabarmati River. And personally, many of them have told across from South Africa, from Europe, everywhere attracted towards that and then seeing that one. I know, as you said, okay, Sir Joseph has done some work in Thames. Somebody has commented on Desi Manhattan. I'm sure. I don't know whether you can become at least the government of India has given you a Batman Shri, okay, which is befitting that particular equivalent to what is Desi Manhattan or Sir Joseph work on Thames. You have done it in the case of Sabarmati River. I am glad that you come across the different, systematically, the 11 issues which you brought about, covering the various aspects, also bringing in the regional dimensions of this riverfront, the various drainage, how it captures, the river edges, how you captured about from the urban perspective, from the urban design perspective, from the architectural perspective, and all the most. But whenever there's some administration comes in or the financiers comes in, it said how it is going to benefit us from kind of a finances. So you capture the value capture, how to bring in this particular thing. And I'm really thankful to you. I'm sure all the participants, a little more than 150 who are now glued into this lecture. We are on their behalf as well as on behalf of SPA Bhopal. We are really thankful to you for this lecture. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.